Mary Annis Crawford Bartel. I'm 88 years old. I was born March 3rd, 1927, and lived in northern Illinois almost all of my life. But I'm happy to be here in Plano, Texas now. Our three sons live close by, and they and their families are very good to me. Our three daughters in the Midwest keep in touch, get to see them every once in a while, and they're very good to me too. And it's an adjustment with Don passing away. 67.5 years married. But I have good memories. I have made good friends here, and it's a very nice place to live here at Preston Place.
Tell us about your birth, Mom.
Well, I always list my birthplace as Linden, Illinois, which definitely could be described as a wide spot in the road. And that was the address of the farm where we lived when I was born. But believe it or not, I was born on my grandmother's dining room table. In those days, most births occurred at home. The doctor came to the home, and home visits were not unusual in those days, but hospitals were very unusual. And I guess fortunately none of us in our family ever went to a hospital during my childhood.
What about electricity?
Electricity? We lived on farms in the days when rural electrification had not started, believe me. And no farmers had electricity unless they were lucky enough, like Don's family, to live on a highway. And since the power line was going right past their home to other towns farther north, they were lucky enough to have electricity, but almost no farmers in those days had electricity.
What about plumbing?
There was no such thing as plumbing. The only convenience that my parents had was a telephone. And it wasn't one of those new iPhones either, nor a smartphone. It was, at least we didn't have 2 rings and 3 shorts and 2 longs and so on and so forth, where everybody listened in. But there were 3 people on a party line, but we were thankful to at least have some communication with the outside world.
What comes to mind when you think about growing up?
Well, on the farm, if you lived on a farm then, if you lived on a farm now, there's plenty of hard work to be done. The only difference then, there weren't any of the labor-saving devices, so kids pitched in too. Children always had chores. Mine were relatively easy as a child, you know. Help with the gardening and pulling the weeds and this and that, taking care of the chickens. And I did help with the milking some, but I said to my mother when I was starting high school, I really don't want to milk cows anymore because I don't like the aroma from the cows that settles in my hair. And she said, well, I understand that, so. However, that didn't work for Don. He still had to milk 40 cows by hand before he went, not by hand, by machine, before he went to high school and after he came home. So he just hated cows. He still hated them the day he passed away.
What did you love to do as a kid before high school?
Well, it was mainly find your own entertainment when you had your own free time. However, I do remember when we got a radio and we used to hurry to get all our chores done so we could come in and listen to Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy, and maybe Little Orphan Annie. I don't remember for sure. But of course, we didn't have a radio when I was first born, but we did have a radio later on when we were teenagers, and that was great. And speaking of the simple life and the simple enjoyments, my great aunt and uncle in Salt Lake City always sent us the Sunday comics, actually in color, believe it or not. And every Thursday we would get the comics, and that was sort of a highlight of the week. And every week we all sent them a little thank you letter too, and let them know what was going on. In those days, people actually wrote letters.
What was your high school like?
You ask singularly. Well, I went to 3 high schools. I started at Milledgeville, Illinois. My parents we were still living on tenant farms in those days. So I started high school in Milledgeville, and when I was a freshman, I remember clearly December 7th, when it was Pearl Harbor Day, when I was a freshman in 1941. And when my parents moved to the Milledgeville farm, it was a pretty nice farm. It was small, and actually I guess we did have indoor plumbing there, and we had electricity. How about that? When I was a freshman. And we only lived there a year though, because Ray Freese and his wife had lived on the farm until, well, my parents were the first tenants, and Ray would come out every day, and that was a little more help than my dad needed on the farm, he felt. So then we moved to another farm at Tampico, Illinois, and Tampico, Illinois it's rather notable for, well, Ronald Reagan was born there, but he, above a grocery store, but he always lists Dixon, Illinois, that big metropolis, as his hometown. And so we lived at Tampico only for 1 year. Went to high school there, and enjoyed it there too, made a lot of friends. And then my parents bought a farm near Morrison, Illinois, and when I went to high school there as a junior and graduated from Morrison High School. And a year after graduation, I found out I was valedictorian when I went to get my transcript so I could go to the University of Illinois.
What do you remember most about your mother?
My mother was just a fabulous person. She never complained about anything, and it was really a very difficult life, because almost every year of her life, the 1 year that she had electricity in a bathroom, except for that, it was a pot-bellied stove that had to keep the house as warm as it could be, I guess within 3 feet of the stove, and a kitchen stove that you know, had to be fired up with firewood and so on and so forth. So life wasn't simple in those days. And my parents' only income well, of course, tenant farm, you know, you share your crop and so on. But the only ready cash that came in was about $6 or $7 a week from the cream that my family separated from the milk and sell the cream. And the milk you use for us to drink and for the pigs to drink, and I think the pigs drank a lot more than we did. Although we drank our share for sure.
What was most important to your mom?
Certainly faith was most important to my mother, and also she was totally tolerant. If any of us children were ever critical of somebody's behavior, she always said, well, you know, you just can't make a judgment about that. You don't know their perspective, and so on and so forth. So she was exceedingly tolerant, very kind, very Christian.
Well, speaking of which, I hear you're a sinner. Would you like to tell us about that?
Oh yeah, right. That was so embarrassing. Now I think it's pretty funny, but anyway, when I was a sophomore and we had moved to Tampico, Illinois, they have a sign outside Tampico that says that was Ronald Reagan's birthplace, but they don't have any sign outside of Tampico, Illinois that says anything about me, which is maybe just as well since I was a public sinner. But anyway, we had just moved there, and my mother and I went to the Baptist church. And at the opening, when we sang a hymn, and then the pastor said, well, now let us pray, and then he prayed, and then he said, now if they're, you know, with heads bowed, eyes closed, now if there are any sinners here, please raise your hand. Well, I raised my hand. I really thought everybody in the world was a sinner, but on that day, I was the only sinner there, plus one man. After church was over, the pastor said, now I would like the sinners to come forward. So I was in a bit of a shock, but my mother said, you would just go forward, and this other sinner went up to this older man. I think he had the DTs or something. Anyway, they prayed for us, which was fine. And then after the ceremony, the minister talked to us, and my mother said, my daughter misunderstood what you were saying. She's already been baptized in the Baptist church and in the Methodist church, and she is a believer. And so that ended that. And on the way home, I said, Mom, if it's all right with you, I just soon go to the Methodist church from here on out. I had joined the Methodist church when we lived in Milledgeville because they didn't have a Baptist church there. She said, I understand. Public sinner.